Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's masterclass where I will be talking about why I think that startups' best kept secret is Oracle Cloud Infrastructure. Now, I imagine that that might come as a surprise, and that when you heard Oracle Cloud, it wasn't perhaps necessarily evoking thoughts of innovation or excitement or any kind of new technologies, because there's still a certain perception that Oracle is a legacy business and that we're not necessarily the go-to name when it comes to the cloud. That was certainly my perspective. So, a bit about myself. I'm a former startup founder. I spent 5 years building an edtech business from founding to exit stage. And as part of that, I worked with other cloud providers. And I have to admit that it was only in my 5th year as a founder that I became aware of Oracle Cloud. And then when I made that transition away from the world of entrepreneurship towards the world of the cloud, looking for any opportunity to learn, to contribute, I was really blown away by the amount of innovation that's happening at the moment at Oracle. And in fact, that excitement, that sense of innovation is one that has only grown over the 18 months that I've been at the company. And because really what has changed is that um, not only have I become more proficient in cloud technologies, I have also learned more about what's going on at Oracle in different product teams. And that's why I'm here to talk today to really sort of give that cutting edge information, the latest and greatest pieces of Oracle technology that are allowing startups to scale without lock-in, without those ties. And I'm really excited to talk about that because my first perception of Oracle was very much one around, okay, perhaps some virtual machines, of course, a lot of databases. I mean, that's what Oracle is known for. And yet, and yet, there's so much more, so much more. And really, I mean, I'm going to talk about several things today, and those are first and foremost high performance computing, because I think that's one area where startups especially need to work with the right cloud providers, because getting the latest models to work on correct infrastructure is something that startups cannot take for granted. And actually, what is super exciting is that there are startups today looking to train GPT-3 on Oracle Cloud. Now, for me, that is just a testament to what Oracle is doing in this space, because it's not just that we have high performance compute infrastructure, it's that we have high performance compute infrastructure that is capable and that is being chosen by startup partners to train the latest cutting edge NLP models. And so I'll talk about high performance compute. I'll also talk about GraalVM. And this is a unique piece of Oracle technology that has come out of Oracle Labs. Oracle Labs being this research lab that is internal to the company. And GraalVM is extremely powerful, both in its ability to increase the speed at which virtual machines are launched and also decrease the memory footprint of microservices, and in the process cut costs. And rounding it off talking about how open the cloud is. So it is just not alone that startups are able to make use of this really unique cutting edge suite of cloud technologies. It's that they can do so under a truly multi-cloud approach where startups are able to access these technologies when they're needed and also not forced to stick to one specific cloud provider through hidden vendor lock-in, for example. And kicking off with high performance computing and why really Oracle Cloud is a startup's best kept secret, because high performance computing is one of the most computationally intensive workloads that a startup can look to run. And the requirements that are associated with such a workload are diverse. So it's not only having access to GPUs for parallelized computing and running. So I've spoken about GPT-3 training in the NLP space. It's also, for example, workloads that are around computer vision and then augmented reality also. And so it's not only from a hardware perspective, it's also, okay, how can these models be effectively run on that hardware? And so there is sort of batch processing facilitation, as well as a focus on adequate and performant data ingestion. And so on the one hand, having the hardware, on the other, having the infrastructure in place to make most efficient use of that hardware. And looking at that hardware, it's not just off the shelf GPUs that startups are gaining access to when they work with Oracle Cloud. It is the cutting edge offerings of manufacturers across the industry. So we have the latest chips from Intel, we have the latest chips from AMD, from Ampere, from NVIDIA, as well as the means of storing and accessing these resources in a highly efficient way. If we look at the bandwidth available through the file server options of 60 to 290 gigabits per second, that is quite something. And so we have a range of hardware available to startups from a high performance compute CPU perspective. And moving over to the GPU side, I think what is especially interesting is that, so yes, we're working with the latest NVIDIA hardware, and more than that, also with our acquisition of Sun Microsystems some time ago now, and yet a lot of that talent from Sun Microsystems is still internal to Oracle. And what that means is that we have some of the greatest minds in industry when it comes to data center infrastructure and networking. And so we're not just putting together racks of these GPUs as they come. Actually, what I'm trying to say is that we're not making use of these racks through the sort of typical GRX configuration that many associate with this hardware. What we've actually done is we've created bespoke optimized data center hardware where, for example, our bare metal GPU 4.8 is a node of 8. And that is 8 A100s that are racked together with custom hardware that our engineers from Sun Microsystems have configured for maximum speed and efficiency of resource use, with some quite compelling hardware accompanying the GPUs. So if we look at the RAM, the storage, and also super interestingly, again, from a large model perspective. So when we look at configuring more than one of these 8 GPU racks together, we have RDMA networking with really some remarkable speeds when it comes to running large clusters of these GPUs for creating some of the most cutting edge models that the industry has to offer. I've spoken about GPT-3, and then there are several other use cases that are particularly suited to this custom hardware that is available to our startups. And so that's a bit about what differentiates Oracle Cloud from a high performance compute perspective from again, looking at the way that the hardware is configured and some of the use cases that is being put to. Now, I think it's interesting also to see where we stand against the competition, and I continue to be surprised when I read this, because again, as a former startup founder myself, I had I thought I had a sense of the industry and which cloud providers were doing what, and I knew the household names. And I have to put my hand up and say, Oracle was not top of my list, far from it. And yet, if we look here, we see actually that Oracle is today in 2021 in a league of its own. And again, you'll say, oh, well, that's fine for Max to say he works at Oracle. Well, I mean, this chart that we have on the right-hand side from a price-performance ratio is a piece of independent research, which really speaks for itself. And so I think it's interesting to see how times are changing and how we continue to move forwards. And wonderfully, the market is catching up. So I may be here sharing what I see as a startup's best kept secret, and yet actually the secret is spreading fast. And so these are some of the startups which I have the pleasure and honor of working with from a high performance compute perspective. And they are, if you will, those early adopters that have realized actually just what Oracle is today. It's not the legacy business that is sometimes perceived in certain quarters. Oracle Cloud today in 2021 is at the forefront of innovation with cutting edge HPC hardware that is in the hands of startups that are doing truly transformational work. So if we look at Hippotos, for example, a deep learning startup out of Berlin who are applying deep learning to document extraction with some of the toughest edge use cases that there are, sort of crumpled receipts and hardly legible handwritten notes. And they've managed to create a state-of-the-art model that is able to extract that data from documents. And they're doing that working with Oracle Cloud. And if we look also at Respo.Vision, this brilliant Polish startup that are applying computer vision to football analytics. And really, when I see that demo, I to think how quickly computer vision is developing as a technology, and how, when properly harnessed by companies like Respo.Vision and making use of hardware like that which is made available through Oracle Cloud, and what that can result in terms of analytics and extracting new and meaningful insights from video data. It's really remarkable. And then also looking at Arti, an Israeli startup that have created this remarkable piece of software that is essentially a augmented reality, a virtual reality studio in your pocket. And instead of previously relying in the media and entertainment business on a sizable room of hardware that was required in post-production for companies, media companies, to create these pieces of content that featured augmented reality, all that's required with Arti is a camera, a phone, a computer, some cloud in the background, Oracle Cloud, and then anyone is equipped on the fly in the studio to create content with augmented reality. And again, that's making use of the NVIDIA A100s in Oracle Cloud. And I think that is a testament to the work that Oracle is doing in the space. And it's not just startups that are clocking onto this secret. It's also some of the world's largest, most recognizable corporates. So if we look at Red Bull Racing, for example, that have chosen Oracle Cloud as their AI, ML, and cloud partner, again, I think this is a testament to how fast the secret is spreading, that Oracle Cloud infrastructure is the place for innovation and access to cutting edge hardware to enable some of the most computationally expensive workloads that are out there. And I think I would just pause there and say, well, certainly, I would imagine from the perspective of a layperson that such premium hardware would come both at a significant cost, and I'll come to that later because the startup program offers a 70% discount. It would come perhaps at a significant cost and also be impossible to move from. And as you might have guessed from the title of my presentation today, Startup Innovation Without the Ties, that actually, thankfully, is not the case, and that it is possible for startups to gain access to this hardware in a both cost-effective manner and with no ties associated with it. So I want to move on now to talk about another piece of just ridiculously interesting technology called GraalVM. And it's a product that has come out of Oracle Labs and that is really unique to Oracle. And what it does is that it is a service that allows for a rapid increase in the spin up time of a server, while at the same time dramatically reducing the memory footprint and in the process reducing costs of running virtual machines. And the wonderful thing is that this is so suited to containerized solutions. So for startups that are looking to reduce the memory footprint of their microservices and in the process reduce their costs, then GraalVM is another part of this Oracle Cloud secret that I'm here to tell you about today. And again, it may be a secret because it still catches a lot of people by surprise. And yet some of the biggest names in industry are onto this secret. So if we look here at what Twitter has been able to achieve, making use of GraalVM, quite something. And yeah, it's quite straightforward to think about what it would look like to have a bill decreased by that amount. And then you start to factor in the 70% discount on offer through the Oracle for Startups program. Now, yeah, for me, it's like the pieces of a jigsaw starting to come together and saying, okay, cutting edge technology, fast, extremely low cost. This is something that I want in on. At least that was my perspective when I came to Oracle, because I said to myself, after 5 years as a founder, when my company was plateauing, I thought that I would like an opportunity to grow, perhaps an opportunity to learn, an opportunity ideally to contribute. And I said to myself, well, short of getting in a time capsule and doing my journey again as a founder, then perhaps I could try and encourage other founders to make use of Oracle Cloud. And I have such a passion for what I do, because this is demonstrable evidence of the value that's on offer through Oracle Cloud. And the numbers, again, continue to speak for themselves. And so to think for very mission critical microservices architectures where deployment, for example, in an HPC perspective and latency matters, perhaps it's for a fintech that is looking to crunch vast and constantly updating data sets around financial trading metrics, market data, then being able to spin up and spin down microservices architectures with less memory, so less costs, and significantly higher speed is meaningful. At least that's what I think. And I mean this here, and I just want to do that again because, hang on. Yeah, so what we're going to see is just quite how fast GraalVM will make the spin up of a server. And I just want to pause and yeah, I mean, just look at that. And I mean, okay, so that is perhaps not a lifetime's worth of time. Well, we watch that happen. And yet, if we think about mission critical workloads where latency is everything, that is an order of magnitude faster running GraalVM. And so I really think that this highlights the extent to which this piece of technology increases the provisioning speed of a VM. And when you scale that out to a massive microservices architecture, yeah, those milliseconds add up, and being able to cut those down is of value. And so I think what's especially interesting also with GraalVM is it's polyglot. So it has multi-language support, and it's a piece of technology that came about as a result of a decade of research. So it is something, because there are, of course, other cloud computing frameworks that are household names in the industry. And yet, I think if it's not the case already for many of you, then more and more over the coming months and years, that GraalVM will become, and from a cloud perspective, a really household name in the framework perspective. And yeah, again, showing the power of multi-language support through GraalVM, and being able to combine these. This example highlights it well. And to summarize, so GraalVM faster and smarter. And I think smarter specifically around the multi-language support and leaner. And so what I'm trying to put together here is the different building blocks, if you will, of how Oracle Cloud Infrastructure can enable startups to run the most computationally intensive workloads with the latest, most performant hardware configured with unique infrastructure and cloud networking expertise, again, through that acquisition of Sun Microsystems that Oracle did back in the day to allow us to provision our data centers in an optimal way, and crucially also cost effectively. So both with a 70% discount from the startup program that I'm going to get to, as well as using technology like GraalVM to reduce the memory footprint, in the process reduce the number of virtual machines required for a startup to run on, and of course, less virtual machines equals less cost. We saw that figure before. Twitter, 5 to 12% less servers for use post adoption of GraalVM. And so, having spoken about HPC, having spoken about GraalVM, again, what I really want to emphasize now is the lack of ties that are associated with this technology. So a startup can make use of this market-leading technology and have significant cost savings with it, while also not having to worry about getting locked into a specific cloud provider. Because, and again, as surprising as this might be for people with certain perceptions of Oracle, that actually Oracle Cloud is open. And Oracle Cloud is open because of the number of open source frameworks that we either contribute to or support, or in fact have built various aspects of our cloud infrastructure on top of. And so for startups that are cloud native, and I imagine that a lot of you will be, that in fact we have our Oracle Kubernetes engine that allows for the effective deployment of microservices. And I think particularly interesting also, given the vendor lock-in that can come from building on top of other serverless frameworks, that our serverless offering, the Oracle serverless offering, is built on top of the FN function, the FN project, sorry. So our functions are open source, and that means, of course, that they can run anywhere. And from an infrastructure as code perspective, our support for Terraform is something that is wonderful for DevOps and provisioning infrastructure in a light touch manner. And again, so these are the various parts of the both infrastructure life cycle, but also the application development life cycle, to show where we have support for open source frameworks. So from a deployment perspective, CI/CD, as well as the rest that you see here. So we have Ansible, Chef, and Terraform at the deployment level. And what that means is that it is possible to work with Oracle Cloud in a way that is truly multi-cloud. So there is access to our resources that are particularly interesting from an HPC perspective, as we've touched upon. They can be optimized with GraalVM, because that means that there is less resources required to achieve the same performance, and that these resources can be perhaps mixed and matched with other resources that one of your customers might look to keep their data in a specific place, and that Oracle Cloud, with the support of all these open source frameworks, is not only without vendor lock-in, but also particularly compatible with a multi-cloud approach. And of course, there's the economic value of that, and there is our API gateway service, which is a really effective way to configure the different aspects of your infrastructure, so that when you're running a multi-cloud architecture, that you can have one central place to essentially connect all of the aspects of your infrastructure together, and do so in a quite programmatic way with not too much heavy lifting. And so to look a bit at the companies that are making use of how open Oracle Cloud is, and just how straightforward it is to work with this infrastructure. So AgroScout, another Israeli company that made use of our Kubernetes engine to deploy and SQL database hosted on Oracle Cloud. And if we look again at those demonstrable results that the company achieved, so 30x performance improvement compared to their previous vendor, and 140x increase in development lifecycle. Quite something. And Snaptech from the UK. So company, computer vision again, so access to GPUs, and don't take it from me, take it from Jenny, how those GPUs have enabled the business growth to take place at such a rapid rate. So not only access to GPUs, but reducing the deployment time by 5x. And crucially, also something I haven't touched upon yet. So if we see here 100% uptime, cloud migration was unnoticed. So through Oracle for Startups, companies have free migration support. And also, interestingly, I really do believe so, is our service level agreement, that we have a industry leading SLA, and that SLA means that not only do we talk about how performant our cloud is that we are willing to stand by that performance and essentially say, this is what we say we're going to live up to, and if we don't, here's money back. And I've yet to see that happen. Having said that, I think having that commitment to uptime and to our performance is a really important other demonstrable indication of our commitment and performance in all things cloud. And so we've spoken a bit about the different open source frameworks, about the startups that are making use of them. And in fact, Oracle is contributing to cloud native and other open source initiatives. Really, so for example, the object storage and its compatibility with Ceph. So CEPH, Ceph, this open source framework for storage. And so really, it's not just paying lip service to openness and the open source community. It's actually being an open and dedicated contributor to this movement. And that our partners are varied. And so we see a list here. So Grafana, for example, from a monitoring and analytics perspective. And of course, we have GitHub and GitLab from a code and release perspective, as well as some other recognizable household names, Palo Alto from a networking perspective. And so we're doing innovative work. We are working with the community and we're working with partners to come together in this ecosystem of openness, of ease of movement, of multi-cloud. And that's why startups are able to make use of these highly performant and unique infrastructure offerings without ties. And so, having spoken about HPC, having spoken about Graal VM, having spoken about cloud native, and all of the ways in which startups can ensure that they can operate in a truly multi-cloud environment while accessing the unique technologies that Oracle Cloud has to offer. For example, being able to facilitate the training of workloads like GPT-3. Interesting, I think, to look about what that looks like from a program perspective, because it's one thing to have the cloud, and I truly hope to have demonstrated that we mean business when it comes to the cloud. Well, Oracle is so much more than an industry-leading cloud when it comes to startups, because we have our Oracle for Startups program. And what that program offers is, at the very least, to begin with, a 70% discount for 2 years on all infrastructure as a service and platform as a service. So imagine, if you will, for a second, having access to those latest NVIDIA A100 resources. So a cluster of 8, perhaps, with a bare metal GPU 4.8, and linking those together with RDMA networking, and then running a workload like GPT-3 with a 70% discount. Now, that's why I like to say that this is a startup's best kept secret, because it is really an offering that, to my knowledge at least, is unmatched in the marketplace. And we've seen that other partners are cottoning onto this. We have seen, for example, with Arti, with Respo.vision, with Hippotos, with, in the industry space, Red Bull. And yet, I'm here today to say, well, I'm sharing the secret with you, and I hope that you will join us on this journey, because really, it is not only about access to a highly performant cloud with a 70% discount, by the way, that can be brought down further with technology like Graal VM and credits exercises like credits to scale, which I'll get to. It's actually that the Oracle for Startups program offers a unique co-selling opportunity where, when a startup makes use of Oracle Cloud and completes certain eligibility criteria called Market Connect, and then has the opportunity to meet our key account customers, then it's essentially putting in motion a virtuous cycle of innovation where everybody stands to benefit. And that those opportunities, so for example, Market Connect, co-selling, and it extends beyond that to also co-marketing. So I'm not sure when next we'll have the opportunity perhaps to all be at an in-person event together. Having said that, nevertheless, the Pine software that we have today is a testament to how, in spite of these horrendous times that we find ourselves in, that it is still possible to come together as a startup community and meet. And that is something that is actually facilitated by Oracle for our startups. So recently, for example, we had the Hanover Messe for industry and supply chain startups, and Oracle facilitated the presence of startup booths in these virtual events. And we have our flagship Oracle Open World events. And it seems that with the way that the pandemic is heading, that it'll be sooner rather than later that we will have the opportunity to perhaps find ourselves at an event again. And then that startups have a booth that's provided for them to, once they've built on Oracle Cloud with these innovative technologies, to then get in front of both Oracle teams, perhaps from an integration perspective, as well as Oracle customers to co-sell. And so again, I spent a long time at the start talking about quite how unique I think our cloud is. And yet somehow it's just the beginning. It is just the beginning, because for those startups that want to, and I need to emphasize that the Oracle for Startups program is self-service. So it is here for startups that in some cases perhaps, and I say just because I think you've realized how evangelical perhaps I am about our cloud, but who just want access to our cloud to train. Well, there is a discount, of course, there are free credits, and yet that it is far beyond that. And the of course, cost savings can be reinvested into the business, and then there is an opportunity for co-selling. And I've spoken about the lack of vendor lock-in, the service, the SLA. I haven't really spoken about the pricing, and I think that's particularly interesting because there is a great degree of transparency around that pricing, and there are several online resources that are available to startups to get an estimation of what running their workloads would look like on Oracle Cloud from a price perspective. And there's, for example, the cloud calculator for cost estimation. There is also, through the Oracle Oracle for Startups Cloud Architect team, so the Cloud Architect team, a resource of the Oracle for Startups organization that is there to provide free migration support. And that was briefly alluded to before on the SnapTech slide, where the founder, Jenny, mentioned how the migration happened essentially in the background and there was no business interruption. And so this team of cloud architects, not only do they assist with the migration, and what that looks like is that there is first and foremost a service mapping exercise. So what are the services that are currently being run elsewhere? What are the corresponding services in Oracle Cloud? And then how to provision that architecture in Oracle Cloud so that the solution can be deployed in an environment that is essentially ready to go. So that is the work of the cloud architect team. And they can also, as part of that service mapping exercise, create a cost estimation exercise where, if they are provided with a list of the current technologies that are running in the environment that you as a startup are making use of today, then a complete sort of month one bill can be forecast for you with the corresponding services in Oracle Cloud. And that bill will show the 70% discount. And really, I have yet to meet a startup that's just not floored by the cost savings that they have when making use of Oracle Cloud. So I think that that's something really interesting to flag also, because I think secrets are one thing when it comes to sharing good news. Not necessarily nice if it's a slightly hush-hush about how much that's going to cost. And yet, part of the secret is the infrastructure, highly performant, works. We're putting our name saying how well it's going to work for you. And by the way, there are no secrets when it comes to the cost. So really to start and round things up, and I'm hoping perhaps that we have the opportunity for Q&A. I have tried to make clear, so for a startup of any size, we have the infrastructure. We have the infrastructure from a cloud perspective, especially when it comes to high performance compute and running some of the most challenging workloads that the industry is working on today: GPT-3, augmented reality, computer vision, and regardless of the space that you find yourself in. So if you're selling to consumers, although there is a certain sweet spot for companies that are looking to target the enterprise because of the co-selling opportunity that is made on offer through Market Connect. And if you're targeting a large addressable market, again, because Oracle has over 400,000 customers, 400,000, and that those customers are able to eventually, perhaps for those companies that become eligible, that they're able to co-sell through Market Connect. So for these customers, and for you who is looking for a lack of ties, so multi-cloud and lack of vendor lock-in, and it is looking for more than that, perhaps also venture capital introductions. We haven't spoken about how through the VC Connect offering of Oracle for Startups, companies are offered the introductions to venture capital funds. And although we as a company don't do corporate venture, we work with a list of top tier VC funds and also growth focused PE funds who have participated in fundraising rounds of the companies that are on our program. And all of this is accessed through a 5-minute enrollment process at oracle.com/startup. The program is year round, so it doesn't run in cohorts. And the program is self-service. So you're not going to be asked to complete this exercise week 2. You're not going to be asked to complete this task 6 months down the line. The program runs for 2 years. And in those 2 years, it is very much about what you want to do with it, be it training large models, be it co-selling. The program is yours to make what you will of it. And so to round off, I think that today in 2021 is a really unique time to be here to tell you about Oracle Cloud because of the hardware that is accessible through Oracle Cloud, those high performance compute resources, the NVIDIA A100s, for example, that our engineers who came to us through the Sun Microsystems acquisition have been able to configure in racks that are uniquely optimized to run some of the most computationally intensive workloads that the market is looking to solve. So GPT-3, computer vision, augmented reality. We have the latest hardware in unique configurations, accessible at a 70% discount with access to unique technology like GraalVM that will reduce the number of servers needed to run microservices architectures and dramatically increase the startup time of these servers. And that it's also offering polyglot, so multi-language support. And that this technology is accessible through a multi-cloud strategy. So not only do we offer compatibility with Oracle Kubernetes engine for the deployment of containerized solutions, our serverless function built on top of the FN project is can run anywhere. So there's no vendor lock in there. We are both welcoming solutions that are cloud native with this range of support, as well as active contributors to the cloud native movement through the CNCF project, for example. And that, so these three unique pieces of technology, so unique from a hardware perspective, unique from GraalVM perspective, and unique also that we do not have that vendor lock-in around our cloud technology, that all of this is accessible with a 70% discount for 2 years through the Oracle for Startups program. And that really remarkable offering is, in fact, for some, but a stepping stone towards opportunities like Market Connect with introductions to Oracle customers, VC Connect with introductions to funds that can contribute to the growth of your company, and with opportunities for co-marketing. That really Oracle Cloud Infrastructure is the best kept secret, not for much longer, but the best kept secret for a startup looking to grow from a technology perspective and looking to not have ties and to really reach the next stage of your growth. And with that, I'd like to thank you all for joining this masterclass today. I'm not sure if the platform allows for Q&A. At the very least, I saw that there is a chat function, and we have 9 minutes left. So I would like to hand it over, and thank you once again for being here. And yes, please, by all means, any questions in the chat. Otherwise, I'll put my email in the chat, and would very much like to stay in touch. So please do not hesitate to reach out. Oh, in fact, it turns out that there are questions. Hang on, it seems I'm in the wrong place. Hang on. Gosh, yes. Hello, everyone. Edwards. So cloud computing. So yes, absolutely. So really, cloud computing is moving from capital expenditure model to an operational expenditure model. And that's perhaps not an explain like I'm five answer. And yet what that means is that before the cloud, companies had to buy their own hardware, and with the cloud, companies can rent it when they need it, and then when the resources aren't needed, they can park them and let someone else use them. And so if I had to draw a broad analogy, I would compare it perhaps to owning a holiday home versus making use of a hotel. And so for business travel, it's not necessarily interesting to own a holiday home in all the different locations that a business traveler has to go to. It's far more efficient to let someone else own that home and make use of that real estate only when it's needed. And yeah, owning a holiday home compared to, which is on premise, compared to making use of business travel in a hotel, which is the cloud. That's the broad analogy that I would use to explain like I'm five cloud computing. And Pulse, so OCI, the range of hardware that it's available, I mean, I don't really speak about it, but there's also streaming services. There is really anything and everything to cater to a startup's needs. So most useful, I would definitely tend towards the high performance compute side, because startups that are looking to train large models are going to struggle to find an infrastructure provider that can meet their requirements from a hardware and a networking perspective, and also to be able to do so at such a cost-effective way. I think we're uniquely positioned from that perspective. And hardware support is indeed available for all startups. There are no criteria for startups to have access to it. It is really open to everyone. So the team of cloud architects that are a part of the Oracle for Startups team, there are 7 cloud architects that are dotted around the world. And then if in the rare cases, I see this perhaps once a quarter, that there is a particularly challenging question around a piece of hardware that is very niche, then the cloud architects can bring in the relevant internal product experts to make sure that the support is available to the startup. So that hardware support is really available to everyone. And so Edwards, to answer your question about cloud computing and blockchain, I think it's an interesting question because it's not straightforward. And what I mean by that is that it seems that there are 2 sides in the market, and one is around how cloud computing is essentially an integral part of blockchain because it democratizes access to the blockchain, because not everyone is able to access resources like the biggest players are. So that's perhaps one side. There's also another side, which is that, and let's be clear, like it is a reality today that we are in an environment where there is a massive shortage of silicon and chips and hardware, and that's for a variety of reasons. So there are supply chain constraints, there are rare earth metal constraints around the assembly of this hardware. And so, and of course, there's just a sheer demand, right? Because this hardware is used, yes, for the blockchain. However, it's also used for gaming. It's also used for video streaming. It's also used for the training of large language models like GPT-3. So I think there's definitely the other side, which is, well, is the cloud the right space for the blockchain? Because, like, if we look at a hierarchy of needs, and there is a crypto miner here who wants to make use of the cloud for crypto mining, and then there's a medical imaging startup on the other side that is looking to make use of the cloud to train their model to detect certain kinds of skin diseases, which will save lives, and both are competing for the same cloud resources. Should those resources go to the crypto mining when those same resources could be dedicated to saving lives? It's a tough call. So I know that there are the libertarians out there. I know that there are those that are more looking at the applications to the greater good, if you will, of the cloud, and how blockchain, while a truly democratic technology in this day and age of resource constraints, might be a barrier to the greater good. I don't know what the answer is, but I think it's a very interesting conversation. And I mean, I know where I stand, but it's perhaps not my place to share my own opinion when I'm here to talk about Oracle. And I realize that we're coming to the top of the hour. And again, I'm so grateful for all of you joining today. And really, I encourage you, like Liesma said, thank you, Liesma, for posting that link. to sign up at oracle.com/startup and to make use of that infrastructure, that performant infrastructure without vendor lock-in and with a 70% discount and opportunities for co-selling, co-marketing. And yeah, I hope to hear from as many of you in a not too distant future. And thank you once again.